Leading this hour, the Justice Department out today with its report on the Uvalde massacre, detailing a list of failures on May 24th, 2022, when an 18-year-old gunman made his way inside Robb Elementary School. Young students and teachers were left trapped in a classroom with the killer more than an hour after the first officers arrived on the scene. Instead of confronting the gunman, the Justice Department found that officers asked and waited for more responders, more equipment. And again, instead of storming into the classroom, police were waiting around for a set of keys to open a classroom door that was probably already unlocked. Not to mention the terrified parents left waiting outside for hours, wanting to run into the school, told they couldn't, learning little to nothing about the status of their children. Just hours after the Justice Department released its report on Uvalde, Attorney General Merrick Garland sat down with CNN, specifically with CNN senior justice correspondent Evan Perez, who joins me now live from Uvalde. And Evan, you asked Attorney General Garland about what he believes are the most significant failures of that day. What did he have to say?
Well, Jake, everything that could go wrong that day did go wrong. This is obviously something that families have been very frustrated with, the idea that they feel there's been a lack of accountability as a result of everything that happened that day. And the Attorney General, really brought back a lot of those feelings by coming here and unveiling this report, 570 pages, that really does expose everything that could have been done and that could have potentially saved lives. Listen to the Attorney General talk about this.
I had long ago read the entire report, but being there, seeing how small the two schoolrooms are and their attachment to each other, the holes in the wall left by the shooters, the places where the children tried to hide, it's just a different experience, both in terms of understanding why tactics were wrong, but also in terms of understanding what happened. We then went to the murals that are painted of each of the children who died, and we saw joyous figures. They intentionally painted them to express the children's joy of life and enormous energy. And just think about the difference between that and what happened to them. And then after that, we went and met with the families who, as I said, expressed pain, anger, and every human emotion that you would expect.
One of the things, reading this report, nearly 600 pages, some of the things that stand out, 45 rounds fired by this shooter while law enforcement is present, families being told that their loved ones are alive when they were not, the false information that was coming from those press conferences, beginning with the one by Governor Abbott and then going through the Department of Public Safety. Looking at what you see in this report, do you believe that anyone who was involved in that response still belongs serving in law enforcement right now?
Look, so the Justice Department doesn't have jurisdiction over these kind of personnel questions. What we can do, and what we've done in this report, is to identify minute by minute, sometimes second by second, what was happening, what the failures of leadership of law enforcement on the scene were, as well as the failures of preparation in advance and of the aftermath of the way things went afterwards in terms of communications, in terms of medical assistance and when it was provided, and in terms of the misinformation thereafter. And I think it's now up to the community, the state and local officials to make the appropriate determinations.
Jake, one of the lingering things that happened, that remains in this community, is this idea that law enforcement circled the wagons. They were trying to protect their own instead of protecting those children. And so there is still a pending investigation by the local district attorney. That's something that certainly you hear from the families who met with the Attorney General. They met with Vanita Gupta, the Associate Attorney General. They spent 2 hours answering their questions. I think that's one of the remaining big questions that the families of those victims have is could perhaps there be charges against anybody as a result of what happened, and certainly for some of those law enforcement people who are still working here in this community, Jake, some of them have gotten promoted. All of those things are obviously keeping a lot of this alive for the family members. Jake?
Yeah, the sheriff is still in office and running for re-election. Evan Perez in Uvalde, Texas. Thanks so much. Joining us now. Joshua Koskoff. He is a lawyer who represents many of the victims' families. Thanks for joining us. So you, along with the families you represent, you were there listening to the U.S. Attorney Merrick Garland detail a series of major failures in leadership, in police tactics, in preparedness, and much more. We know this review mainly reaffirmed what the families already knew. Was there anything in this review that surprised you or any of the families?
Thank you, Jake. No, not really. I mean, the bottom line was clear to all of us, no more so than to the families the day of the shooting, which was that this was a historic failure of law enforcement in what is really their most important obligation, and that's to protect our children at a time of crisis. So they already knew that, and the report, as your colleague said, is 570 pages. So nobody's read it yet. But the level of detail certainly was meaningful.
So Uvalde County District Attorney Christina Mitchell has not finished her inquiry into what happened that day. She hasn't charged any law enforcement personnel with anything. Are there any specific criminal charges that you would want filed against anybody in law enforcement?
Well, I think it's not really my place as a civil lawyer to comment on that, but I would say that there's a lot of frustration, not just particularly with the local authorities, in her failure to be transparent. There's the impression, Jake, of a cover-up. Whether or not there is or not, we don't know. But families in this situation should not get that impression. And I think that's what the DOJ did well today, was they made it clear to these families that they were taking their case very seriously. There was no sense of a cover-up. And if anything, there was so much detail that setting to the families. That's not what they're getting here in Texas at the local level.
Are you surprised it's taken so long for the district attorney there in Texas to either file charges or announce that no one's going to be charged, given that this happened in May 2022? We're almost coming up to the 2-year anniversary.
Yeah, I mean, I think the proof is in the DOJ report. I mean, the federal government is not known to operate at lightning speed. And here I'm sitting, I have a 570-page report right here that was conducted over the course of months. So I think it really shines a light on the failure of the DA to move with speed and deliberate speed. I mean, it was going to take some time, but I think there's a lot of frustration about that.
Are there other legal avenues that you and the victims' families are pursuing?
Well, right now, we have to keep all options on the table. So we're looking at all angles of this, Jake. One of my frustrations with DOJ's focus is they didn't focus at all on the acquisition of this weapon by this 18-year-old kid. And just a reminder, this was an 18-year-old, a kid who just turned 18, who single-handedly held off over 300 federal officers who were heavily armed. And I think the lead that's been buried here, how did this 18-year-old kid so easily access an AR-15? Not just one, he actually bought 2 of them within a week and not set off any bells. So that's a concern, that we lose track of what could have made a difference here.
Joshua Koskoff, thank you so much for your time today. Yeah.
Thank you very much,
Joshua Koskoff, thank you so much. We're and our thoughts and our prayers and our condolences to the families. I cannot imagine their grief.